Well, that's another year down. Another year of going through the trials and tribulations of life, another year of watching animated movies, and another year of getting requests to review The Loud House. Hit the bricks, guys, it's not happening. If I ever upload another Loud House video, please assume that I'm struggling to pay rent unless I say otherwise. But yeah, 2024 has been a very interesting and eventful year, at least for me. Felt like I made a lot of positive progress on myself. Aside from me and my friends being stalked by Just a Robot at VidCon, yes, I was there, it was very funny. And what helps with me being able to look back at my year and go, yeah, that was alright, was the realization that 2024 was a pretty good year for animated movies, which makes my job a lot easier. So unlike last year's ranking video, this will not be a 30-minute whinge fest. Last year, a lot of people were overhyping how good we really had it, or at least that's how I felt. This year though, while there's still been some pretty terrible films here and there were far more that I managed to enjoy and ultimately think are worth your time and attention. However, that's mostly on the mainstream side of things. Just like last year, I wasn't able to watch as many foreign animated movies as I usually do, mostly because I had no legal or illegal means of watching them. In fact, there are 2 films on this list that I had basically no choice but to pirate since their UK releases were aiming for 2025, and because of that, the quality I had to make do with really did not do their animation or audio much justice. Still though, I tried to include as many films as I could here. Some of them are films that technically came out in 2023 but had their wider releases delayed for 2024, like Robot Dreams and Chicken for Linda, so I'm counting those too. I'm basically ready to get started, but I do want to establish some things first. This list is based entirely on the films that I have seen. Be fully aware that not every animated movie from 2024 is going to be on this list. Secondly, a big reason for that is that a lot of easy targets for worst animated movie of the year are typically low-budget bargain bin movies that are almost entirely derivative of other better movies. Or they're Ryan's world. They're low-hanging fruits and I do not bother watching them. Thirdly, I will be looking at fully animated movies only. This does not include live-action hybrid movies like Harold and the Purple Crayon, If, and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And despite it being completely CG animated, I am not reviewing the new Lion King movie because calling that an animated movie should have you sent to a gulag. And finally, I am fully aware that in roughly 10 days there will be a new Wallace and Gromit movie that I won't be able to talk about today. So I'm gonna have to assume all of you have the common sense to never doubt Wallace and Gromit again, you motherfuckers. Hope that's all well and good. Please grab whatever snacks you need and try not to vomit because we're jumping straight into Megamind 2. I mean, what else is there to say about Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate? I've already talked about it twice this year, that's an honor many things are lucky to have. DreamWorks in general have had a pretty rough year. The 1-2 punch of Doom Syndicate and the ensuing TV show being the laughing stock of the internet and then being followed up by the aggressively mediocre Kung Fu Panda 4. Then their other release was highly divisive of audiences and then all of the behind the scenes stuff happened. Seriously, if they didn't have Wild Robot up their sleeves, 2024 would have been DreamWorks' worst year by a long shot. In fact, because of the behind the scenes stuff, I'd argue it still is. Sorry I'm not talking about Doom Syndicate, but that's the thing. I would rather talk about anything else in relation to this movie than the movie itself. It was never intended to be a full-on theatrical sequel to Megamind, and was just meant to be a backdoor pilot for the new TV show on Peacock. The marketing completely screwed the movie over and soured people's expectations weeks before it was released. Then it released, and it was a billion times worse than anyone could have imagined. Truly god-awful animation, even for the standards of made-for-TV movies. A script that is absolutely miserable to hear spoken out loud and somehow written by the writers of the original film, completely assassinating both Megamind and Roxanne just to replace them with extremely poor Flanderizations, and generally being a complete misunderstanding of what made Megamind so beloved in the first place. It's an embarrassing showing, and easily one of the worst movies I've seen all year. I enjoyed Borderlands more than this. Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate is what happens when a brand is way too late to hop on the hype train of one of their established movies suddenly exploding in popularity, on top of their churned out attempt to appeal to its new fans being completely half-hearted. A cash grab through and through. I get this technically counts as a live-action hybrid movie, but it's f***ing SpongeBob, let me have this. Okay, someone needs to explain to me how Netflix has so many goddamn leaks. Not only did the entirety of the Sandy Cheeks movie, completely finished from beginning to end, leak onto the internet half a year before its intended release date, but recently the same thing happened to the upcoming Plankton movie. Are these SpongeBob spin-off films just cursed or something? No, I'm not actually against having more of these SpongeBob spin-off films happen, because while they are absolutely being made on the cheap, the Plankton movie demonstrates just how much potential there is in giving SpongeBob side characters their time in the spotlight. It's genuinely a great character study of Plankton and was pretty entertaining. I have no problem with them continuing this with other characters like Squidward or Mr. Krabs, etc. But I have no idea what happened with the Sandy Cheeks movie. How the f did this turn out so bad? Part of me wants to believe it's because Sandy just doesn't work that well as a protagonist, but there's so much you can explore with her as a character given her life on the surface that could make for an entertaining and interesting film. And, besides finally introducing us to Sandy's family, the movie does nothing with this. It's just a shallow adventure with some of the worst jokes and scenes to ever grace the franchise, and that is saying a lot when it comes to this yellow bastard. And it doesn't help that the movie's complete and utter refusal to shut up for more than 5 seconds makes this one of the most irritating cinematic experiences I have had in years. It is the absolute worst of modern SpongeBob all crammed into one baffling package, and that's without even mentioning the live action segments, which are far and away the worst parts of the movie. You can argue that they're trying to be campy, but this is just bad camp. Terrible performances, even worse jokes. It's just a cringe fest. I only consider it better than Doom Syndicate because it still has some of that classic SpongeBob charm in certain areas, and the animation is still decent. If you think this movie is derivative slop, you'd be correct, but what I bet you didn't know was that this movie was allegedly absolute hell to work on. In the most hilarious way I have ever seen a movie's working conditions be exposed, multiple people who worked on the film left some pretty scathing reviews on Letterboxd about how poorly they were treated, how throughout the 4 years of production hell it went through, they were yelled at, harassed, doing multiple jobs that were above their pay grade without being allowed to go on vacation. It was just a very miserable time. Allegedly, but given multiple people wrote their reviews here, I'd say this has a good bit of credibility to it. I mean, according to this one, they were still rewriting parts of this movie a year out from release, and to be honest, you can really feel that. Everything about The Tiger's Apprentice is cheap. The plot is nothing you haven't seen before, the characters are nothing you haven't seen before, everything that's happening here has been done before and better by plenty of other films. There are parts where the animation looks good, but it also looks cheap at the same time. It's a very weird aesthetic. Honestly, I felt like including this here just because I find the story behind its production more interesting than the film itself, and I also enjoy making fun of corporations when they harass their workers into complete oblivion and the movie ends up being terrible because of it, though in all fairness I don't think more time could have saved the complete lack of writing talent here. Here's another addition to the pile of completely derivative slop movies. Skydance Animation keeps proving itself to be the biggest corporate cope session in animation right now. They want to be Disney and Pixar so bad, to the point of taking on John Lasseter, who really should not have a job right now. Just like their last movie, Luck, this is a colorful distraction with a simple story that can be used to pacify children. And if that's the niche that Skydance want to fill, then fine, they can do that. But I really get the feeling they want to be more than that. And if they want to be more than that, they're going to have to actually carve their own identity for a change instead of branding themselves as Diet Pixar and banking off the achievements of whatever schmuck they managed to wrangle into the studio to make their slop. From the visionary behind Toy Story, yeah, that wasn't the only thing he was the visionary behind. Spellbound is bound to become irrelevant in a few months' time. No one is going to remember this movie. I mean, congrats on being the best Garfield movie, I guess. A shame that the bar is so low for such an iconic character, but still that's worth drawing attention to. Many people drew the line at Chris Pratt voicing Mario. I drew the line at him voicing Garfield. Shit, I think he sounds better as Mario. It's not an earth-shattering performance, but at least he's kind of trying to sound like he's from New York. I don't need Garfield to sound completely bored all the time, but I only heard Chris Pratt throughout this entire movie, not Garfield. And speaking of being completely bored, there just isn't really much you can do with a Garfield movie beyond putting him in situations that just don't happen in the comic strips. Garfield is such a simple but well-established character with a well-established formula that breaking free from that and being good takes some effort. I'm not even a fan of Garfield, I think Jim Davis is a hack. Yes, I get my opinions from Lasagna Cat, it's not my fault it's the best web series to ever be made, but with all of that being said, this really could have been about any character other than Garfield and it could have worked. There's nothing significant about this being a Garfield movie beyond the usual things you'd expect. Haha lasagna, haha lazy cat, f you Garfield, you fraud, my cat is better than you. And I really don't get why there are so many boring side characters with these completely uninteresting side stories. Who cares? It's a movie about the orange cat, lasagna cat, Garfield, Big Garf. Read Giant Days, by the way, it's very good. I guess the animation looks good. I still can't believe it took this long for a theatrical Garfield movie to be animated, but it translates the visual style and charm of the comics very well into CG. That's all it has going for it though, just a complete bore otherwise. Okay, fine. You win. I'll talk about the new Loud House movies here, but only so I don't have to give them their own videos. So despite the Casagrandes being a ratings failure and being cancelled, they managed to squeak out one final hurrah of their own movie. And similarly to how the first Loud House movie completely ditched the grounded and down-to-earth charm that gave the series its appeal in the first place in favor of dragons, magic stones, etc., the Casagrandes movie goes the whole 15 miles and just introduces actual gods and shit into the mix. I got the sense they were running out of ideas for the Loud House ages ago, but having to go back on the entire appeal of your concept just to find new and interesting ways to jump the shark is the definition of washed. Visually, the movie looks really nice though. The actual animation, while better than the Loud House movie, still suffers from the same choppiness and overly ambitious choreography, but it's still very vibrant with some really nice shading. The plot though, I couldn't care about it at all. It's a fantasy story in a series that was originally meant to be a down-to-earth and relatable show about surviving in a big family. It is completely out of place and didn't give me many reasons to care. None of the jokes particularly stood out either. The Loud House No Time to Spy though is considerably better than all of the previous Loud House movies. It's just unfortunate that it's also not that great. Animation is good for sure, and there's some enjoyment to be had with all the spy stuff, but at its heart, this is still post-season 1 Loud House with all of its trappings. Definitely not in the same tier of shark jumping as actual gods, but still not very inspired. Moana 2, while not the worst thing I've ever seen, just evokes such a visceral negative reaction from me. I hate that this movie exists, I hate how it was made, I hate the fact that it's doing well in the box office because all of Disney's hateable business practices are going to continue and people are going to copy them. That's the reason why I called it a cinematic disaster. As a film, it's bad, but generally just whatever, but it's what it represents that I find truly detestable. The film itself though, well, I've already talked about it recently so I won't waste much of your time. It's boring and incredibly forgettable. It was cobbled together from the pieces of a cancelled Moana TV show because Disney needed to rush out a major hit after Wish proved itself to be money repellent. You can see where every single corner was cut during production. The plot is a disjointed mess that feels like multiple episodes of a TV show were poorly stitched together because that's exactly what happened. The characters are actual nobodies with no depth or attempts at being developed, the pacing is super uneven, the jokes suck, the music sucks bad because apparently Disney needed to be washed in their music department too, and the animation is somehow less impressive than everything the first movie did 8 years ago. Because again, this was a Disney Plus series that Disney had hacked to pieces and glued back together just to charge you for it with extortionate theater prices. Disney may be raking in money of their failures this time around, but the passion is clearly gone. I despise Moana 2 on principle, and despite it really not being that bad of a film, I cannot let go of the visceral disgust I feel whenever I see its title. The industry is in a really poor state right now, and to see something like this succeed genuinely feels like we got the bad ending. Orion and the Dark is the most mixed I have been on an animated movie in years. On the one hand, I love what it's trying to do and trying to say, and that the film genuinely seems to have some balls. A story not about overcoming fears but learning to live with them. It's a very mature angle that you don't see many kids movies tackle, and they do some pretty dark shit here. The animation looks fine and has an interesting art style. This all looks great. But then the story, Orion and the Dark loses its fucking mind after a good while, and the film becomes completely incomprehensible garbage noise, and it's like, no! Why? Why did you do any of that? You are ruining what could be a perfectly serviceable, possibly good movie for this garbled mess of nonsense involving time travel shenanigans, completely incoherent character motivations, and then just revealing that the entire story was an entire crock of bullshit, and it's like, why? What was the point of any of that? This movie has so much going for it conceptually and visually, and it wastes it on this absolute fever dream narrative. I do not understand how this movie got so many highly positive reviews. There is nothing profound about making your story so incoherent that it would make the executives who oversaw Christopher Nolan's work on Tenet have a fucking breakdown. It's not confusing in an interesting, this movie is like a puzzle way. It's confusing in the you just ruined your completely solid and interesting narrative for no reason way. I don't think I can actually put into words how utterly confused I am. I'm not even angry, I'm just puzzled, befuddled, bewildered. I am lost. If you want to watch this movie, either do it while you're high off the best plant you can find or while you're drunk. I think it will be a significantly more enjoyable experience. Unfortunately, I don't smoke nor drink, so I will not be watching Orion and the random bullshit ever again. Goodbye. It's honestly a shame that Illumination's movies are so mid. They're so based when it comes to their stances on generative AI and actually treating their employees with respect, that if they actually decide to lock in and not just settle for releasing perfectly enjoyable but safe and bland movies, they could genuinely rival Disney and Pixar at this point. Again, Despicable Me 1 is a good movie. Very good, actually. Hell, I'd go as far as saying Despicable Me 2 is okay. You can be good and still make money at the same time, guys, I promise. But yeah, Despicable Me 4 is just kind of bad. I enjoyed it for the most part. As with any Illumination movie, there are standout moments and good jokes, and visually the movie is sound, but it's just so safe and predictable. It knows it's safe and predictable. These movies are designed in a lab to be as appealing to families as possible. They show up, fire a bunch of jokes at the wall, dazzle with some nice animation, then take another billion of your money. That's the Illumination formula. The story and characters are paper thin as usual, as they've made it abundantly clear they aren't going to do anything about that. They want the characters to never age. They want Despicable Me to be the film equivalent to The Simpsons. I don't need Despicable Me to be particularly challenging, I'm not the target audience after all. But going back to the first movie and seeing how laugh out loud funny it was while telling a pretty touching story really makes me wish the newer movies had any of that sauce. I guess the only other thing to talk about is a new Pharrell song possibly being a Drake diss. Like, I'm imagining he was taking Adonis to see the new trending kids movie in theaters only to be jump scared by. Some of your dirt has come to light. It is very likely not a Drake diss, but it's funny, so I believe it. Straight up, this isn't a Kung Fu Panda movie, it just doesn't feel like one. Or at the very least, it feels like one that was playing at 2x speed with absolutely none of the character and thematic depth that made the original trilogy so interesting. I still don't believe for a second that DreamWorks had any intention of picking Kung Fu Panda back up after the third movie. Kung Fu Panda 4 is such an underwhelming experience that beggars belief. It dumbs down everything people like about this series. Poe's character development for the previous two movies is completely reversed. The whole concept of Poe retiring from being the Dragon Warrior doesn't make any sense. The Furious 5 just aren't here and are lazily hand-waved away at the start of the movie. The villain sucks total ass, which is especially bad in a franchise that has had consistently great villains until this point, and Awkwafina needs to stop being typecast. Whatever action that is here is fine enough, but nothing here feels like Kung Fu Panda. It's a soulless and hollow imitation. And this movie's pacing, dude, Jesus Christ, the movie doesn't shut up ever, and the story moves a mile a minute. It's more concerned with being a wacky, haha, funny panda do kung fu movie, and completely forgets that what made the series great was that it was so much more than that. There was so much artistry and passion on display with every action set piece. The choreography was fantastic, the themes were super impactful and told with heart. Poe was an actual character beyond all the goofy stuff he would do for laughs, and even when the movies only focus on the goofy parts of Poe and nothing else, they still do it worse than the first three movies. And the less I talk about how bastardized the Kung Fu Panda art directions become, the better. This does not look like a character that belongs in this universe. This is one of the biggest disappointments of the year for a lot of people, because it shouldn't shock you to realize that Kung Fu Panda has a pretty devoted fan base, being one of the main recognizable pillars of DreamWorks. People loved these movies as kids and then had a greater appreciation for them as adults. Kung Fu Panda 4 is a baby movie in a franchise that was universally praised for its surprising depth and maturity. And knowing there's going to be more films in the franchise going forward that would likely continue taking this approach, I have basically no hope left. I sure hope DreamWorks don't have any other long concluded franchises they wish to resurrect for no good reason. That would be quite a shame, wouldn't it? An anime movie for Lord of the Rings was gonna have my attention, but I really wish it didn't. Not only is the animation not all that impressive, but if you're expecting storytelling on the level of Lord of the Rings, either the book or the movies, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. Granted, this entire movie completely outclasses the Hobbit trilogy, but that's not a particularly high bar. Very weak characters and a super bland story that lacks the imagination of the source material, and trust me, when you're an installment in the Lord of the Rings franchise, that's a bit of a problem. This is quite literally peak fiction. Not much else can actually say it tops Lord of the Rings. A mediocre Lord of the Rings movie will be noticed, that's how wide the quality gap is. A Lord of the Rings prequel has loads of potential, but it's wasted on this bland, uninteresting medieval fantasy. Calling something related to Tolkien bland should be a sin, but making a bland adaptation or addition to Tolkien's work is even worse. My Hero Academia movies are very much like fast food. Not the bad kind of fast food either, like you enjoy the meal but you don't tend to remember much afterwards. There's not much they can really do to help that though. These movies are technically canon, but they're in the weird position where they have to fit into the story of the anime without causing any continuity issues or making any big changes to the status quo. Because if a bunch of anime onlys find out halfway through the new season that part of the plot requires them to watch a movie that they didn't even know had important story context, they would go completely apeshit. That being said though, that doesn't mean the experience itself has to be forgettable. level. They can try harder if they want, but it doesn't really happen. I gave up on My Hero Academia a while back. I thought the anime was going downhill. First 3 seasons and the first half of season 4 were absolutely fantastic, but everything else after that was super underwhelming. The manga has been substantially better, but I fell off of it a couple years back and only picked it back up recently. This is to say, I have plenty of experience with My Hero to the point where I can easily recommend this movie to fans and basically no one else. They do go hard with the animation in these movies, which is nice to see given after season 4 the anime just kind of stopped trying, and it is fun, don't get me wrong. In an age where most superhero movies make me groan in agony, it's nice to have something light and fun that doesn't disrespect my intelligence, but I doubt I'll be thinking much about this movie later down the line, nor do I think I'll go out my way to watch it again unless I go insane and do a rewatch of the entire anime. Lego Martin Luther King. Now that I have your attention, I liked Piece by Piece. At the very least, it's worth a watch just for the style alone. I don't think there was any actual reason Pharrell wanted this documentary to be animated in the style of the Lego movies beyond, wouldn't it be cool if I made a documentary of Lego Kendrick Lamar? And you know what, I respect that. Visually the movie is great and I respect it for being so confident with its unique visual approach, but as a movie it's just okay. I've seen far more captivating documentaries than this, but it's good at what it sets out to do. I'll always respect Pharrell as an artist. I mean, he made 5 original songs for this movie, for crying out loud, you gotta respect that at least. And I mean, this is probably the most personal a documentary has felt in forever. The fact it's Lego for no other reason than it being a fun idea is proof enough that this movie has a soul, and I do earnestly love it for that. I just wish I had more to like about it. Look, for as much as I may make fun of the French, I'm British, it's in my DNA, French animation continues to find new ways to blow my expectations out of the water. There are so many incredible animated movies that never get the attention they deserve because they were made in France and also aren't mainstream. You guys need to start watching more French animated movies. I don't care that their language is ridiculous. I brought up Chicken for Linda in my last ranking video and I've had my eye on it for a while now, waiting for a wider release. Well, I finally got one and I was pretty satisfied. Chicken for Linda is a very simple film but uses that simplicity to its advantage. It's funny but never overbearing. It's heartfelt but never too sappy, and that restraint makes the movie so much more emotionally resonant than I expected it to be. Telling a fun but moving story about grief and motherly love that I think a lot of people should check out. Visually, the movie is gorgeous. Every frame looks like a painting and the colors are always popping and holding your attention. It's a very unique style for an animated movie and helps to round out the film's personality and identity. Definitely check this one out. It's not gonna blow you away, but it's a very warm and cozy movie. No, Riley, don't have a realistic depiction of a panic attack. Alright, I submit, Inside Out 2 is a good movie. One might say it's a very good movie. As much as I detest the current state of Pixar and how much they're focusing on sequels to established IP, not helped by this movie almost raking in $2 billion, I can't deny that Inside Out 2 is probably the best sequel Pixar have made since Toy Story 3. Nowhere close to topping the original movie, let's be clear. Inside Out 1 is still one of Pixar's finest, but this is more than an acceptable sequel. I still have my qualms with the new emotions basically just being more nuanced versions of the main 5, when the entire point of the first movie was that more complex feelings stem from the main 5 than just the black and white definitions of anger, sadness, joy, fear, and disgust. But they're handled very well here, especially anxiety. As easy as it is to make fun of the coincidental trend of animated movies having a realistic depiction of a panic attack, I do appreciate how accurate they are, and Inside Out 2 specifically is very powerful. I also found this movie to be a lot funnier than the first. I did not expect to find this as funny as I did. Thank you, Youngye, you did a great job here. Just please deepen your voices Kiryu and Kiwami free, please, thank you. Also, this movie moves. Like, it is significantly faster than the first movie, and rarely did I find that to be a detriment. It's a fast-paced movie that actually seems to recognize its limits. I thought that was illegal. This is a good movie, and I do recommend you check it out if you haven't, but I'm still not a fan of the fact it exists. I am so sorry I didn't make a video about Transformers 1 when it mattered. I was going through a lot of things at the time and I only watched the movie after all the hype had died down, but man, I did not expect it to kick this much ass. Everything people tell you about how this movie will genuinely make you want to run a marathon after you finish it is 100% accurate. Transformers 1 is electrifying. I'm not even a Transformers fan. I've had plenty of experience with the Transformers franchise since I was a kid, but I was never really a massive fan of it or got super into the story. I never read any of the comics. I am very much a casual Transformers viewer. Then I watched this movie and I get it. I get it. The more I rewatch this movie, the more it makes me wish I was a Transformers fan. I genuinely don't think there's a more perfect way to get into Transformers than watching this movie for the first time. It tells such an engaging and believable story, working perfectly as an origin for Optimus Prime and Megatron. You go in knowing who these characters are going to be by the end, but nothing about this movie makes you groan because of it being predictable, nor does it have the prequel syndrome of trying to tie into things that happen later in the most lame way imaginable. I need an example. You know how in the Han Solo movie he asks Chewbacca for his name for the first time and he goes, huh, Chewbacca? I'm gonna need a nickname because I ain't saying that every time. Like, that's the I'm talking about. It's lame. It's too on the nose. Transformers 1 is never lame. The bond between Orion and D16 is so strongly written. It really does feel like they've been friends for years, and to see it slowly wither away as D16 becomes Megatron is devastating. The way the movie handles the fall of D16 in general is awesome, with his reasoning for going bad being completely understandable. And here's the thing. I was never too into Transformers lore, but man, something about Transformers 1 had me locked in the entire time. I find everything about Cybertron interesting and cool as now. And let me tell you, the final act of this movie is genuinely one of the best and most hyped sequences of events I have seen all year. The finale is so earth-shatteringly fantastic, it defies comprehension. You know what? F it, I'm just gonna accept it. Transformers 1 made me a Transformers fan, okay? I cannot stop thinking about this goddamn movie. It's not even my favorite movie of the year. Like, at most, I think this is an 8 out of 10, but the things this movie makes me feel, I mean, God. Oh yeah, all the vocal performances were fantastic too. Brian Tyree Henry needs an award for his performance as D16, and hearing Chris Hemsworth's voice slowly becoming more like Peter Cullen's over the course of the movie until he's nearly indistinguishable was insanely impressive. Sure, some of the jokes may have been lame and B was kind of annoying, but Transformers 1 needs to be seen. Please give this movie a chance. I saw this movie on the crappiest pirated copy imaginable, so unfortunately I did not get to appreciate the animation and audio as I was watching, but from what I can tell from the trailers, this movie looks absolutely stunning. Flow is a breathtaking movie that manages to be exciting, intense, and emotionally powerful all without saying a single word. There is no spoken dialogue throughout this entire movie, and that makes the entire experience so much more impressive to me. Being able to tell such an incredible and deeply engaging story without any dialogue is an incredible feat, but unlike say the Shaun the Sheep movie, which is able to rely on a lot of silent comedy, Flow is a much more mature film that wants the viewer to engage with everything happening on screen and interpret it themselves. It's a film I can see being a little divisive among some people, because a lot of people don't like films that have no dialogue and they want things spoon-fed to them, or at the very least explained to them by narration or by characters in the story, and that's fine, it's down to preference obviously, but I absolutely love this. It's not a film you see very often these days. Being able to appreciate the artistry on display is one thing, but actually engaging with what's going on and interpreting the utter calamity that's unfolding from the perspective of this tiny little cat, they don't have a name so that'll have to do, really allows you to appreciate everything that the movie has to offer. The absorbing atmosphere, the subtle expressions, it's all brilliant. Any other year this would probably be a strong contender for my favorite movie, but there's a lot of competition this year. Finally, I have been waiting to see Robot Dreams for ages, and I can confidently say it was worth the wait and then some. Just like Flow, Robot Dreams is a story told without any dialogue, and all my praise towards how Flow handled it applies here too. This is such an adorable and charming film from beginning to end with good-natured humor, but the more melancholic parts of the film still hit you with significant impact. As heartwarming and fun as Robot Dreams can be, it is also a very heartbreaking movie all about the pain of loss and about overcoming loneliness. Remember people, this is a movie about loneliness. It is going to get very real with you despite its cute exterior. And Jesus, can we talk about that exterior for a second, because this is some of the most fluid 2D animation I've seen in a hot minute. It's never doing anything too crazy, but it's scarily consistent and gorgeously detailed. Again, while the no dialogue thing is going to be an acquired taste for some, I think people are likely going to give it more of a pass here than with Flow. Flow is a lot more atmospheric and subtle, whereas Robot Dreams is quite direct with its storytelling and what it's about, but never in a way that's obnoxious or overbearing. Those two words never once crossed my mind while I was trying not to cry at this. I had no idea this movie was a thing until like a week before it was releasing, and I have hated myself ever since. Mary and Max is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I urge any of you who haven't seen it to drop what you're doing and find it immediately. So hearing that Adam Elliott, who hasn't made a theatrical animated movie since Mary and Max 15 years ago, was finally releasing something new, I was chomping at the bit to see it for myself. So much so that, much like Flow, I was forced into watching a low-quality cam rip because the movie is not going to be available in the UK until next year. But it's okay, because I know from the trailers that this movie looks absolutely fantastic. I am so happy we are still getting stop motion movies in 2024 that aren't from Aardman and Laika. Fantastic studios, some of my favorites actually, but I really need more stop motion movies in my life. Let's make things clear. Memoir of a Snail is a very dark movie, and part of that darkness comes from the moments of levity that are here because Adam Elliott has a very dark sense of humor. But Memoir of a Snail is a very dark movie. It's very sad, bad things happen, it's a very upsetting and intense movie to stomach. But it's not misery porn or anything. Like, I'm sorry if I'm holding your hand throughout this, but please understand this all has a point. It's very effective and this movie will make you cry, that is a guarantee. It is achingly beautiful. I do not glaze this movie lightly. The way Elliot masterfully balances the tones of his movies is incredible. I've never seen a director be able to so seamlessly switch between being funny and sad on a dime, and have it not be jarring. Please watch it through whatever means you have available. You will thank me later. My mind has two distinct states. Oh my god, he's cooking. And kill Tatsuki Fujimoto! Look Back absolutely stole my heart from minute one. And despite its short length, there have been very few animated movies released this year that spoke to my very soul the way this one did. As someone who has always enjoyed creating things, whether that's YouTube videos, personal projects, etc., Look Back had me emotionally hooked on a level that very few movies can even hope to achieve. It's a very moving and thoughtful story that examines the lives of artists and everything that comes with the profession. The friendship between Fujino and Kyomoto is at the center of all of it, and believe me when I tell you this movie will leave you devastated by the time the credits roll. Even though I don't draw myself, I mean just look at this, the movie captures the struggles that artists go through perfectly, and it can apply to basically anyone who applies themselves creatively to anything, either as a hobby or for a living. And the animation throughout the film is just spectacular. There are so many incredible shots here. I wish I could talk more about this movie, but the last thing I want to do is devalue the experience for anyone interested. And also because the movie is criminally short. It's an adaptation of a one-shot manga, so the film only clocks in at roughly an hour, but even though it's not the film's fault, I really wanted more of it. It's a straightforward story, so it being short makes reviewing it without spoilers kind of impossible. So please, if you are going to take away anything from this video, watch Look Back. Please. It may be short, but the film's length doesn't matter to me when the end result is one of the most heartbreaking and thought-provoking things I've had the fortune of seeing all year. Well, this was a surprise to basically no one. Even though DreamWorks has had it rough this year, I'm very happy they at least went out with a bang. The Wild Robot is DreamWorks' best movie, and I am not being hyperbolic about that. I had to debate with myself for weeks if I thought this movie was better than the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, something I didn't think I'd have to do for a DreamWorks movie ever again. I guess it makes sense that the only DreamWorks film capable of topping How to Train Your Dragon came from the director of How to Train Your Dragon, but I digress. I was very worried when I saw the animals start talking in the trailer, but I think a lot of people were too. Many people got the impression this was going to be a mostly dialogueless film, much akin to the first act of Wall-E or something, and I think we're all tired of overly annoying talking animal characters that cannot stop yapping up a fucking storm, so I was incredibly relieved that the animals were not only not annoying in the actual film, they enhanced the experience. This movie would not be the same without them. The Wild Robot is one of those films that will leave you completely absorbed from beginning to end. While you may have definitely seen stories like this before, you have not seen it told like this, and I am so happy that the end result is able to stand toe-to-toe with these stories instead of being completely derivative. And as you'd expect from the trailers, the animation is jaw-droppingly beautiful, applying many of the artistic choices found in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and creating a refined visual style all its own. I have no doubt in my mind that this is the best animated film to release this year, but it is sad that this will be the last DreamWorks movie to be produced in-house. All work after The Wild Robot will be outsourced to different studios, and I do worry that the quality of their films are going to suffer because of this. I really hope that's not the case, but things will likely not be the same after this, and The Wild Robot definitely marks an end of an era for DreamWorks. No matter what happens after this, I'm at least happy and satisfied I got to go out with a bang. And that's it. That was my ranking for every animated movie that released in 2024 that I saw myself. I'm going to assume based on very reasonable evidence that Wallace and Gromit will be the greatest film ever to release in the history of ever. When the film releases, please come back to this video and assume it will be placed somewhere between Robot Dreams, Memoir of a Snail, Look Back, and The Wild Robot. If I'm wrong and the film ends up being bad, then you will see me on the news. Thank you for watching. This will not be my final video of the year. I just really wanted to work on something I liked for a change, considering the video I was making beforehand was, depressing. I guess I should look at some movies that are releasing next year. An animated reboot of The Smurfs by Chris Miller. Best known for directing Shrek the Third. Oh wow, we're fucked. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Play yucks. Oh! That's all my videos. That's all my videos from September 2023 onwards getting copyright claim because of my outro song. Don't send hate to Losing Streak. I doubt they did this. I guess it's time for a new one.